My wife sent a text by mistake. She had no idea I was reading it next to her. That Friday evening started like any other. My wife Elaine and I were relaxing on our porch swing, watching the sunset paint our suburban neighborhood in warm hues of orange and pink. 15 years of marriage had settled us into a comfortable routine. At least that's what I thought. I was 40, a tenured professor at the local university. Elaine, 38, had recently been promoted to marketing director at her firm. We had built what I believed was a solid life together. No children by mutual choice, but a beautiful home, successful careers, and what I had always assumed was unshakable trust. "Want another glass of wine?" I asked, getting up to refill mine. Elaine nodded, her attention fixed on her phone. I headed to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of Cabernet, and returned to the porch. As I sat down, placing her glass on the small table between us, her phone chimed with an incoming message. The screen lit up, and I caught a glimpse of the text before she quickly turned the phone away. "He'll never find out." My heart stuttered. In that instant, the evening air seemed to thicken around me. The sender's name was listed simply as M. Elaine's face softened into a smile as she read the message. She had no idea that I had seen it. No idea that in those 4 words, my entire world had begun to crumble. "Everything okay?" I managed to ask, surprised at how normal my voice sounded when inside. I felt like I was breaking apart. "Just work stuff," she replied smoothly, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Thanks for the wine." I nodded, taking a long sip from my glass, trying to calm the sudden storm in my chest. The wine tasted like nothing. My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe it was about a surprise party. Maybe it was a work project she wasn't supposed to tell me about. But the smile on her face when she read that text, I knew that smile. It wasn't her work smile. It wasn't her friend's smile. It was something else entirely. Something I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. We finished our wine in what felt like excruciating silence to me, though Elaine seemed perfectly at ease. She talked about an upcoming conference in Chicago, asked about my department meeting, discussed maybe trying that new Thai restaurant on Saturday, all while I sat there, nodding and responding on autopilot, the text burning in my mind. "I think I'll take a shower," she said eventually, standing up and stretching. "It's been a long week." I watched her walk inside, my wife of 15 years, suddenly a stranger to me. When I heard the shower running, I did something I'd never done before. I looked for her phone. It was on our bed, screen locked. I knew her password, her birth year, followed by mine. We'd never kept those kinds of secrets from each other. Or so I'd thought. My hands trembled as I typed in the numbers. The home screen appeared and I tapped on her messages. The conversation with M was gone, completely deleted. The knot in my stomach tightened. I heard the shower turn off and quickly placed the phone exactly where I'd found it, retreating to my home office down the hall. I sat at my desk in the dark, staring at the framed photo of us from our 10th anniversary trip to Greece. Elaine's smile, bright and seemingly genuine, now felt like a mockery. "He'll never find out." 5 words that would keep me awake all night, lying beside the woman I'd shared my life with, wondering what else I didn't know about her, wondering when exactly I had become he instead of you, wondering what secrets were hidden behind that smile I once trusted completely. The days following my discovery passed in a fog of doubt and confusion. I went through the motions of normalcy, teaching my classes, attending faculty meetings, sharing meals with Elaine, while inside, I was falling apart. "You've been quiet lately," Elaine remarked one evening as we prepared dinner together. "Everything okay at work?" "Just tired," I lied, chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. "End of semester crunch." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with my explanation. I studied her face, searching for signs of guilt, for any crack in her performance, but found none. Either she was an exceptional actress or I was losing my mind. I wanted desperately to believe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe M was Megan from her office, and they were planning a surprise for another colleague. Maybe it was about my birthday still 3 months away. My mind crafted elaborate scenarios to explain away that text, each more implausible than the last. But as the weeks passed, I began noticing things, Small things that might have slipped by before, but now glared like warning signs. The late nights at work became more frequent. "Big project," she'd explain, with a tired smile. Her phone was now always face down, always with her. She'd started taking calls in another room, her voice dropping to a whisper. New clothes appeared in her closet, things I'd never seen before. She'd changed her perfume. One Thursday evening, I called her office around 7, wanting to suggest picking up dinner on my way home. "I'm sorry, Dr. Reynolds," her assistant said. "Elaine left around 5 today. Said she had a dentist appointment." There was no dentist appointment. She'd told me she had a late meeting. That night she came home at 9, hair slightly damp, claiming the meeting ran long and she'd stopped at the gym afterward. I nodded and smiled, feeling sick to my stomach. I began keeping a journal, documenting these inconsistencies. Not because I wanted evidence for a divorce, I wasn't ready to even think that word, but because I needed to assure myself I wasn't imagining things, that my suspicions weren't just paranoia poisoning a perfectly good marriage. One night I couldn't sleep. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office, where I opened my laptop and stared at our joint bank accounts. Nothing unusual there. Then I checked our credit card statements. A charge at the Grand Hotel downtown 3 weeks ago on a Tuesday when she'd said she was at a marketing seminar in the suburbs. Lunch charges for 2 at expensive restaurants on days she'd claimed to be eating at her desk. A jewelry store purchase I'd never seen her wear. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the world tilt beneath me. With shaking hands, I opened our phone bill. Dozens of calls and texts to a number I didn't recognize at all hours, most on days when she'd worked late. The next morning, as Elaine showered, I did another thing I'd never done before. I installed a tracking app on her phone. I felt disgusted with myself, sick with the knowledge that our relationship had deteriorated to this point, but I needed to know. That Sunday, Elaine announced she had to go into the office for a few hours. "Crisis with the Miller account," she explained, kissing my cheek. "Don't wait on lunch." As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I opened the tracking app. I watched as the little blue dot that represented my wife moved through the city, not toward her office downtown, but toward the residential area on the north side. The dot stopped at an upscale apartment complex. I knew the building. Luxury units, doorman, private balconies overlooking the park. The kind of place a successful businessman might live. The kind of place you'd take someone you didn't want to be seen with in public. The dot remained stationary for 3 hours. When Elaine returned home that afternoon, cheeks flushed, she launched into a detailed explanation of the Miller crisis and how she'd saved the day. I nodded and smiled, my heart splintering with each lie that fell from her lips. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling, the weight of 15 years pressing down on my chest. I knew I should confront her, demand the truth, walk away. Instead, I decided to find out who M was, because some irrational part of me still hoped there was an explanation, some reason that wouldn't destroy everything we'd built together, some reason that would allow me to wake up tomorrow and trust my wife again. Finding out who M was proved easier than I expected. Elaine had grown careless, perhaps believing I was too trusting or too oblivious to notice. One night when she was in the shower, her phone lit up with a calendar notification, "Meeting with Mark 2 p.m., the same number I'd found on our phone bill. Mark, M. I wrote down the number, and the next day, during my lunch break, I did a reverse lookup. Mark Chambers, financial advisor at Westbrook Investments. A simple Google search revealed a polished corporate headshot, mid-40s, confident smile, wedding ring clearly visible on his left hand. My stomach clenched. Not only was my wife having an affair, but she was doing it with a married man. Over the next week, I gathered more evidence. The tracking app showed regular visits to Mark's apartment. Credit card statements revealed dinners and hotel stays. I even found emails in our shared computer, ones she'd forgotten to delete, arranging meetings disguised as client consultations. But the final confirmation came from the most unexpected source. I ran into Helen, Elaine's colleague, at the campus coffee shop. We'd met several times at company functions, and she greeted me warmly. "Gregory, how are you? I haven't seen you since the holiday party." We exchanged pleasantries before she asked, So how's Elaine doing with all the excitement? She must be thrilled. I froze, forcing a smile. What excitement is that? Helen's expression shifted, realizing she'd said something she shouldn't have. Oh, I just meant the new project with Mark Chambers' team. Right, I nodded, playing along. She's been working late quite a bit on that. I bet, Helen said, a slight edge to her voice. Their working dinners seem to run pretty late. Last week they didn't leave the restaurant until nearly midnight. The way she emphasized working dinners told me all I needed to know. Others had noticed. Perhaps everyone knew except me. I thanked Helen for the chat and walked back to my office in a daze, each step heavier than the last. I cancelled my afternoon classes, telling the department secretary I was ill. It wasn't a lie. That evening, I confronted the final piece of the puzzle. While Elaine was at yet another late meeting, I searched our home office and found a folder hidden behind her reference books labeled Retirement Planning. Inside were documents that shattered what little hope I had left. Mark and Elaine had opened a joint investment account. They'd been siphoning money from our retirement funds, my retirement funds, into this account for months. Nearly $80,000 transferred, with notes about using it as capital for a business venture they planned to start together. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together, with my money. I sat in the dark office for hours, folder open on my lap, trying to make sense of the last 15 years. Had any of it been real? When had she stopped loving me? Or had she ever loved me at all? When Elaine came home around 11, I was in bed, pretending to sleep. She crept in quietly, and I felt the mattress dip as she slid under the covers. The scent of unfamiliar cologne clung to her, not even masked by the shower she'd obviously taken before coming home. I lay there listening to her breathing slow as she drifted off to sleep, wondering how she could rest so peacefully while destroying everything we'd built together. In that moment, something broke inside me, but something else hardened. The shock and grief gave way to cold clarity. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I wouldn't give her the chance to lie, to manipulate me with tears and promises and explanations. No, I would be as calculating as she had been. I would protect myself, my future, and what remained of my dignity. And when the time was right, when everything was in place, then, and only then, would I let Elaine know that her husband had found out exactly what she thought he never would. I became a different man after discovering the truth. On the outside, I remained the same loving husband, attentive, thoughtful, unsuspecting. Inside, I was calculating, methodical, planning my next steps with the precision of a chess player, anticipating his opponent's moves. First, I met with a lawyer, not in town where someone might recognize me, but in a neighboring city. Angela Reeves was sharp, experienced, and merciless in her assessment. "This is textbook financial infidelity coupled with actual infidelity," she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "The good news is that with this evidence, we can build a strong case for you." I didn't want to destroy Elaine. Despite everything, 15 years of marriage doesn't vanish overnight. But I wouldn't let her destroy me either. "What do you recommend?" I asked. Angela outlined a strategy. Document everything, secure my finances, gather undeniable evidence, prepare for the confrontation. And, most importantly, don't let Elaine know I was aware of her betrayal until everything was in place. "The element of surprise is your strongest advantage," Angela advised. "Use it wisely." The next day, I opened a new bank account at a different bank. Over the coming weeks, I gradually moved half of our joint savings into it, leaving her share untouched, taking only what was rightfully mine. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance policy from Elaine to my sister. I contacted our retirement fund manager and froze any outgoing transfers, citing security concerns. I documented every unauthorized withdrawal Elaine and Mark had already made, building a paper trail for eventual restitution. All while maintaining the facade of our marriage. I brought her coffee in the morning, asked about her day, listened to her lies with a smile, kissed her goodbye as she left to meet her lover. It was the performance of my lifetime. During this time, I also rediscovered parts of myself that had faded during our marriage. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. I started hiking on weekends when Elaine was working. I joined a photography club, rekindling a passion I'd abandoned years ago. Slowly I was building not just my case but my future, a future without Elaine. The thought still ached, but not as sharply as before. 3 months after discovering the text, I received a call from my sister, Emma. "Greg, I'm worried about you. You don't sound like yourself lately," she said. We'd always been close, but I hadn't told her about Elaine's betrayal. That night over dinner, I confided in Emma everything I'd discovered. The affair, the financial deceit, my silent counter-strategy. "My God, Greg," she whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "How are you even functioning? How can you stand to be in the same house with her?" I explained my plan. To confront Elaine only when I was emotionally and financially protected, when she couldn't manipulate or harm me further. "And when will that be?" Emma asked. "Our anniversary," I replied. 1 month from now." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. 15 years of marriage, ending on the day we'd once celebrated its beginning. The following weeks were a strange blur. I finalized my preparations, legally, financially, emotionally. I found a small apartment across town and signed a 6-month lease, paid the deposit. I packed a few essential belongings and stored them at Emma's house. All while playing the role of doting husband, even suggesting to Elaine that we should do something special for our upcoming anniversary. "We could go back to that restaurant where I proposed," I suggested one evening. "Make a whole night of it." "That sounds perfect," she agreed, looking genuinely pleased. 15 years deserves a celebration. The earnest warmth in her eyes almost made me falter. How could she compartmentalize so effectively? How could she plan a future with another man while reminiscing about our past? 2 weeks before our anniversary, I confirmed reservations at Giovanni's, the upscale Italian restaurant where I'd proposed a lifetime ago. I ordered flowers, bought a card, even purchased theater tickets for after dinner. Everyone, Elaine included, thought I was planning an anniversary celebration. In reality, I was orchestrating the perfect ending to a marriage that had already died the moment I saw those 5 words on her phone. "He'll never find out." Little did she know, I had found out everything. And soon, she would too. Our 15th anniversary arrived on a perfect autumn evening. The maple trees lining our street had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from neighborhood fireplaces. Nature had provided a beautiful backdrop for the end of my marriage. I'd spent the day finalizing details. The envelope of evidence was tucked inside my suit jacket. My overnight bag was already in my car trunk. I'd made arrangements to stay at Emma's until I settled into my new apartment. When I came downstairs, Elaine was waiting in the living room. She wore a deep blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair swept up elegantly. For a moment, looking at her took my breath away. Not just her beauty, but the crushing realization that I was seeing a stranger wearing my wife's face. "You look handsome," she said, adjusting my tie with practiced intimacy. "Happy anniversary, darling." I smiled, the words, "thank you," sticking in my throat. The drive to Giovanni's was quiet, filled with Elaine's chatter about work, carefully avoiding any mention of Mark. I nodded at appropriate intervals, my mind rehearsing what I would say when the moment came. The restaurant welcomed us with warm lighting and the rich aromas of Italian cuisine. The maitre d' led us to the same corner table where I had proposed 15 years ago. I'd requested it specifically. "This is perfect," Elaine said, looking around with apparent nostalgia. "Do you remember how nervous you were that night?" "I remember everything," I replied, my voice steady. We ordered wine, a Barolo, her favorite. When it arrived, Elaine raised her glass. "To 15 wonderful years," she toasted. I clinked my glass against hers. "To truth," I countered. Something in my tone made her pause, but she quickly recovered, taking a sip of her wine. Through appetizers and main courses, we maintained the charade of a happily married couple celebrating a milestone. I asked her about memories from our early years together. She reminisced about our honeymoon, the house we'd bought, holidays with family. Her performance was flawless, her eyes shining with what looked like genuine affection. Had I not seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed her. That was the cruelest part, how convincing her lies had become. After the waiter cleared our plates, I ordered coffee. The moment had arrived. "I have something for you," I said, reaching inside my jacket. Elaine smiled, anticipating a gift. "You didn't have to." Actually, I did. I placed the envelope on the table between us. Open it. Her smile faltered slightly, but she reached for the envelope. What is this? Tickets to somewhere? In a way, it's a ticket to the truth. She opened the envelope and began to pull out the contents. First, the screenshot of the text from Mark. He'll never find out. Then bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, hotel receipts, phone records, photos from the private investigator I'd hired, showing her and Mark entering his apartment building. The color drained from her face. Her hands trembled as she shuffled through the evidence of her betrayal, laid bare on the white tablecloth between us. "Gregory," she began, her voice a whisper. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't insult me with more lies." She stared at me, her carefully constructed world crumbling visibly. "How long have you known?" "Since that evening on the porch 3 months ago. I saw his text." Elaine's eyes widened with realization. "All this time, you've been gathering evidence, protecting myself?" "Yes." The restaurant continued its gentle hum around us, oblivious to the dissolution of a 15-year marriage happening in the corner. "I can explain," she started, reaching for my hand across the table. I withdrew it. "I'm not interested in explanations, Elaine. I'm not here for a discussion or reconciliation. I'm here to inform you that I know everything. The affair, the money, the future you were planning with him using my retirement funds." Tears welled in her eyes. Were they genuine or another performance? I no longer knew or cared. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. I placed my wedding ring on the table. "Now I leave. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow with divorce papers. I've taken only what's rightfully mine. I won't contest anything else, the house, the cars. I just want this to be over as quickly and cleanly as possible." "Gregory, please," she pleaded, tears now flowing freely. 15 years, you can't just throw that away." "I didn't," I replied, standing up and placing enough cash on the table to cover our meal. "You did. The moment you decided that I would never find out." 1 year later, I stood on the observation deck of Mount Wilson, adjusting my camera to capture the golden hour light spilling across Los Angeles. The sprawling city below seemed tiny from this height, reminding me how perspective changes everything. The divorce had been finalized 8 months ago. Elaine didn't fight it. The evidence was too overwhelming. In the end, we divided our assets without drama. I let her keep the house, though I learned later she sold it and moved into a smaller condo. The retirement funds she and Mark had siphoned were returned as part of the settlement. Mark's wife had found out about the affair around the same time I confronted Elaine. Apparently she'd been suspicious for months. Their divorce had been messier than ours. 3 children were involved. I felt for them, innocent casualties of their father's selfishness. As for Mark and Elaine's grand plans, their business venture collapsed before it even began. Mark had lost his job once the firm discovered he'd been courting clients for his side business. Last I heard, Elaine had moved to Seattle for a fresh start. I adjusted my lens, focusing on the horizon where Earth met sky. Photography had become more than a hobby in the past year. It had become my salvation. Through the viewfinder, I rediscovered beauty in a world that had temporarily lost its luster. "That's going to be stunning," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Caroline, her curly hair whipping in the mountain breeze. We'd met 4 months ago at a photography workshop I'd joined on Emma's insistence. "You can't hide in your apartment forever," my sister had lectured. She was right, as usual. Caroline was a high school art teacher with a passion for landscape photography. Our friendship had evolved naturally, without pressure or expectation. We'd spent weekends exploring state parks, chasing perfect light, discussing composition over coffee. She knew about Elaine, about the betrayal. I'd been honest from the start. She understood my caution, my hesitation to trust again. "Want me to take one with you in it?" she offered, gesturing to my camera. I smiled and handed it over. "Just don't make me pose." She laughed, the sound carried away by the wind. "Wouldn't dream of it, Professor. Just look natural." As she framed the shot, I gazed out at the landscape, thinking about the journey of the past year. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. Betrayal leaves scars that never fully fade, but its sharp edges had softened. I'd learned that heartbreak doesn't define you unless you let it. Emma had been my rock through the darkest days, letting me crash in her guest room, listening to my anger and grief without judgment. My colleagues had rallied around me when rumors of the divorce spread through campus. Even my students had noticed the change in me, not just the sadness at first, but the gradual lightening, the return of enthusiasm for my work. I'd published 2 articles in prestigious journals, earned a research grant I'd been pursuing for years, and been invited to speak at a conference in London next month. Caroline was coming with me, her first trip overseas. "Got it," she said, returning my camera. "Want to see?" I scrolled to the image, myself in profile against the panoramic view, the golden light highlighting the silver that had appeared at my temples this past year. I looked contemplative, but peaceful. Different from the man I'd been before, but not diminished. If anything, more substantial. "You have a good eye," I told her. "I have a good subject," she countered with a soft smile. We packed up our gear as the sun began its final descent. In my car, driving down the winding mountain road, Caroline asked if I wanted to stop for dinner. "I was thinking we could try that new place in Pasadena," she suggested. "Sounds perfect." As we drove, I thought about trust, how easily it breaks, how painstakingly it rebuilds. I wasn't the same trusting man who'd sat on that porch swing a year ago, oblivious to his wife's betrayal. But I wasn't bitter either. I'd found balance in the aftermath, learned to trust selectively rather than blindly. Caroline reached over and squeezed my hand briefly before returning her own to her lap. No demands, no expectations, just a simple gesture of connection. It was enough for now. Maybe someday it would be more. Later that evening, back in my apartment, a bright, open space filled with my photographs and books, I received an email that made me pause. Elaine's name in my inbox, the first direct contact since the divorce. I hesitated before opening it. "Gregory," it began. "I've wanted to write for months, but couldn't find the right words. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know how deeply I regret hurting you. You deserved better. I hope you found happiness. I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and become someone better than the person who betrayed you. Be well, Elaine." I read it twice, then closed my laptop without responding. Perhaps someday I would, perhaps not. Either way, her words no longer had the power to derail me. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Tomorrow I would teach my morning class, have lunch with a colleague, then meet Caroline to plan our London itinerary. Simple moments in a life reclaimed. "He'll never find out," Mark had texted Elaine that fateful evening. But I had found out, not just about her betrayal, but about my own resilience, about the life waiting beyond the one I thought I wanted, about the strength that comes from facing truth, however painful. And in that discovery, I had found my way back to myself.